Van, the last stand against the zombie apocalypse. Van knew it was only a matter of time before the dead would rise and life would be forever changed. He had seen the horror movies and read the books, but he never thought it would actually happen. But when it did, it was more horrific than he ever could have imagined. The dead rose from their graves, their eyes glowing a deep red, their skin gray and rotting. They were stronger than ever and soon they were ravaging the city, killing anyone in their path. Van had been alone since the outbreak. His wife and children had been killed in the initial chaos, and he had been running ever since. He had no one to turn to, no one to help him, so he had been surviving on his own, scavenging for food and supplies wherever he could. He was walking through an abandoned neighborhood one day when he heard a faint moaning coming from a nearby house. He cautiously approached the house and peered through the window. Inside, he saw a woman, lying on the floor, covered in blood. He rushed inside to help her, calling out to her. The woman, Gina, lifted her head and looked at him with terrified eyes. She was screaming and trembling with fear as she told him about the zombies that had attacked her. Van carefully lifted her off the floor and carried her out of the house. He took her to the closest safe house he knew of and tended to her wounds. As the days went by, Van and Gina slowly began to bond. He was the only person she had left, and he soon felt like she was the only person he had left, too. For weeks, they stayed together in the safe house, Van keeping watch at night while Gina slept. One night, while Van was on watch, he saw something move outside the window. He cautiously moved closer to investigate and saw, to his horror, that it was a zombie. It had somehow managed to make its way into the safe house and was slowly making its way towards Gina's room. Van rushed inside and, as quietly as he could, he grabbed Gina and dragged her out of the house. As they ran, the zombie followed close behind them. Van was out of breath and Gina was barely able to keep up, but he never stopped running until they were far away from the zombie. They eventually made it to an abandoned warehouse and hid there for the remainder of the night. In the morning, they made their way back to the safe house, hoping that the zombie had moved on. But when they arrived, they were met with a horrifying sight. The zombie had been waiting for them and it had ripped through the doors and windows, destroying everything inside. Van and Gina were devastated and did not know what to do. They decided to leave and travel to a different safe house. As they walked, Van kept looking over his shoulder, expecting the zombie to appear at any moment. But it never did. The zombie seemed to have disappeared, like it had never been there in the first place. Van and Gina sighed with relief and continued on their way, thinking that their nightmare was finally over. Little did they know, however, that the zombie was still out there, waiting for them. It had followed them from the safe house and had been tracking them ever since. As Van and Gina reached the gates of the new safe house, the zombie appeared from the shadows and attacked them. Gina screamed in fear and Van fought back, but it was no use. In a matter of minutes, the zombie had ripped both of them apart, leaving only their lifeless bodies behind. The zombie stood there, watching over them as if they were its own, finally content with the horrible revenge it had taken. With Van and Gina now dead, it had ensured that no one else would suffer the same fate. The zombie moved on, leaving two bodies behind, a reminder of its horrific reign of terror. From then on, Van and Gina's deaths were a warning to all who dared to challenge the zombie horde. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like and tell us what you think in the comments. And of course, don't forget to subscribe.